Hello, all. Welcome. This is Malathi, your host of Voices of AI Leadership podcast. You all might be wondering, what does it take to build a company where AI actually runs the work, not just report on it? Our guest today knows the answer. Francis Brero, VP of AI Strategy at HG Insights, leads the company's push to become an AI native enterprise. Before this, he co-founded MadKudu, and I just now Francis was mentioning that it got acquired by HG Insights. So what a great transition. At MadKudu, he helped invent predictive lead scoring, the idea that AI can tell you who will buy before you do. So today, Francis is helping organizations move from insights to real execution using AI agents, automation, and intelligent workflows. If you want to understand how AI changes how companies operate, this conversation is for you. So, Francis, we are so super excited to have you on our show. So, you helped build MadKudu, right? So, where AI shaped how companies score leads and prioritize revenue. How did that experience prepare you for leading AI transformation at HG Insights?
Yeah, well, first off, thanks for having me on the show. Excited to be here. I think the one of the biggest realizations was, coming from an academic background that was already in data science, AI, and machine learning. I think what I uncovered was that when, you try to apply any of this to the world of business and, influence the actual pipeline, what you're trying to accomplish is more important than the technicality of how you do it. And I think too frequently people get enamored with the AI that they're using or like the sophistication of the process they're building rather than focusing on how can we pragmatically apply AI, ML, whatever, to solve a business process. So I think that was a really big learning from MadKudu that ultimately people don't necessarily care that much about the how. What they care about is the what it does.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, in the world of AI, when we're looking at transitioning how we operate, there's identification of the workforce and agentification of the work itself. And so it really is about identifying what it is we're trying to do and figuring out what are the systems that can be changed rather than just trying to blatantly apply AI everywhere.
Wonderful. So, you at HG Insights is generally becoming an AI native enterprise, right? In simple terms, what does that mean and why it is important now?
So I'll start with why it's important now. I think there are two components. One of them from a product positioning perspective, it's really important, I think, today in 2025 and early 2026 to be on the AI agent wave, because I do think we are at a unique point in time where there is a big wave of AI acquisition that's going to happen in the enterprise, where all of a sudden all of these budgets are available and up for grabs. You look at RV and like some of the legal software in AI, it's not like all of a sudden the TAM just exploded. It's that every single law firm in the US is looking at an AI solution today. They're going to buy one and then they're not going to switch, right? So there's a bit of a land grab moment that's happening right now. So I think it's really critical to be part of the conversation, right? We need to get in front of our customers and our enterprises and show them how we can be like a core component of the infrastructure of the AI agents that they're going to build. So that's kind of number one from it's so important from the market positioning. I think internally there's a big element, which is you look at the revenues of companies that are going to IPO, you look at the revenue per employees of some of the AI native startups, the numbers are just incredible, right? You take like a Mid-Journey, they were at 200 million in revenue with 50 employees. Like the ARR per employee is just unheard of. And the reason those companies can do this is one, like there's a go-to-market portion, like there is a lot of pull on the market, but there's another component which is internally, they build everything on top of AI. They're really AI native. And so that's the thing that we're trying to change of. It's no longer the play of you figure out how to do something and then you hire people that are more junior to do the thing that you figured out how to do. And that's kind of how you scale by like applying more people to it. Now it really becomes, okay, I have this job to be done. If I'm a system thinker, I can think of how do I decompose that into multiple steps. And for each of the steps, I can determine how do I automate it and to what percentage can I automate it. And then from that, you start distributing it to agents and to like internal automation tools. And so all of a sudden, we move from this world where productivity used to be, how do I get 90 people to do the job that 100 people were doing? To in a new world with AI, it's like, how do I get 10 incredible people to do what 100 people were not able to do? And so that changes the scope of what a company can do. It is what will keep companies relevant or lead them to, be forgotten because, the train is moving, it's moving fast. And yeah, people have to hop onto it because I don't think it's going to stop for, anytime soon. So if you're not hopping on the train right now, you're not going to be able to catch up.
Very true. Well said, Francis. There's a lot of fear among people like AI is going to take over the jobs, but experts in the field also have said that if you don't adapt to AI or integrate with your current processes, you're going to be left behind. So people who don't use AI are going to be left behind rather than AI taking over the job. So I agree with you. That's very well put. So your role right now is bridging the strategy, engineering, culture, and operations.
Yep. It's twofold. It's like internally, how do we change the way we do things
Yeah,
across the board, right? So even on the engineering side, what is the new software development lifecycle, right? I feel like there's a big stigma around this where people call it vibe coding because they have this idea of like some engineer going into ChatGPT and saying, oh, like build me this feature and then like taking the code and iterating on it. That's vibe coding. That's very different from the AI driven software development lifecycle where it's about we write down the specs, we really define like what is our philosophy in writing code, like how do we architecture systems, and then you become an architect and you outsource the writing of the code to an LLM because that's if you've done a good job in like product specs and architecture specs, generating the code isn't necessarily the hard part. And so that's a new way of approaching software, which allows us to go a lot faster. And so there's that on the engineering side. There's on the marketing side. How do we rethink the way we can do marketing? How do we rethink ABM in the era of AI where we can scale one-to-one marketing to thousands of companies? It's just a little bit more compute. And so there's that internally. And then externally, it's really how do we reshape our product offering to be relevant in a world where, I think a year from now, we will have more agents in the workforce, AI agents in the workforce than we will
absolutely.
have humans. And
Yeah,
so what does that mean from a product offering perspective? What does it mean from a monetization perspective? So those are kind of the more external facing questions that we have to answer and my team is working on.
wonderful. I mean, we are Databricks partners. So on one of the partners call, they were mentioning about, and this we have solved with one of the client is how agentic AIs are more easier and faster they can do when the operations and domains are more vertical than enterprise grade. Just moving on to what you said, right? How do you explain your mission today to someone who's unfamiliar with AI?
Internally or externally?
I would say
Or the mission,
externally.
the internal mission or the external mission?
External mission. How would you bring that?
Yeah, I think the external mission is fairly simple. I mean, for someone who understands the basic concepts of startups and private equity, it's I think every single SaaS company out there is going to lose product market fit in the next 18 months because the fabric of organizations, the fabric of knowledge work is going to change. We're already starting to see that fabric of how we do things dramatically change. And what that means is that processes, products, like value offerings that were relevant a year ago will probably no longer be relevant when, again, like we have AI agents that are doing a substantial amount of the work, right? So what I'm doing is essentially preparing the company to be relevant in 18 months.
Wow, that's wonderful.
And it's existential. I think that's like one of the things that is hard to reckon with is, will companies take a year, 2 years, 5 years to become obsolete? It doesn't really matter at the end of the day. If you're not making that turn, figuring out how you're going to be relevant in 18 months, you've already signed like your kind of death certificate. Like you are going to be obsolete in a very near future. And your valuation as a company is just, going to be written off.
Yeah. Now, you led the CPO as a chief product officer, right? So, what are your thoughts on how should CPOs or product leaders think about AI differently today than they did 5 years ago, right? Somewhat, if you could elaborate your experience and what you're seeing in the market.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot. I think we went from, even a year ago, I think AI was like very clearly a productivity gain tool. it could do things, it could help you do things at higher scale. I think that was cool. And you look at the valuations that were assigned to like some of the foundational labs, right? Anthropic,
Yep.
OpenAI. There is a clear bet from the market that we are going towards labor displacement, right? The only way you can justify the valuations of these companies is if you fundamentally believe that companies are going to be taking some of their labor budget and placing it onto these companies. Otherwise, like just the TAM is too small in just pure software spend to justify the valuations of these companies. So there is like a strong consensus, at least within the people that are investing in these, substantial amount of people, that that's happening. So product leaders used to think about, AI is a line item. We need to add it, say, yes, we are AI ready. And yes, our PMs are using AI so that we're more productive and we're going to see a 15%, productivity gain, all that kind of stuff. Now I think there's a bigger reckoning of fundamentally, again, the fabric of the workforce is going to be changed in the next 12, 18, even call it 5 years, right? It doesn't really matter. But this is near-term future. And so then the question becomes, and this is why being a product leader is so interesting, like everybody can predict the first order change, right? So we have a bunch of AI workforces. Cool. First order change is we probably have fewer people. We also need to change the interfaces, right? Because all of a sudden it's not a human interacting with our UI, it's, an LLM or like some kind of agentic system. Is a UI still the right interface? That's kind of order one, right? That's fairly simple. But there is a, order two or the three of like, what becomes, like, how do we think about pricing models? How does a company think about buying software, right? So now, like, is marketing going to start buying software through compute? Are they going to become like kind of engineers of like thinking about their spend like the engineers think about AWS? These are questions that I don't think will be solved until we get there. So I think as a product leader, you have to make some informed bets, which is always risky, right? Because you make a bet that defines a strategy, then you execute on the strategy. You might iterate as you go, but you have to take a stance and you can't just follow what people are doing. And so I think it's a very significant change in figuring out what is our vision of what this AI enabled world looks like.
Yeah.
In that world, how is our product relevant? How is our product useful? That's like a big question that CPOs need to answer today and need to present to the board and understand that it's a hard question, right? When you've been doing something for 10 years to think, okay, like we have to reinvent ourselves entirely to not fall off of the face of the earth. It is a big challenge.
Yeah, no, that's well put, Francis, because a lot of the people and organizations are very much in this, I would say, in this confusion or maybe lack of better word, but they say they want AI, but they don't know how to make it work also. There's a segment of organizations which are in this. So what do you think is the biggest mistake you see organizations make actually?
I think the biggest mistake I've seen companies make is not come to terms with the urgency needed. I think it's easy to look at your roadmap, to look at your technical debt, and to consider, hey, guys, like we have 6 months, 9 months of committed roadmap that our customers are asking for. That's one of the biggest challenges. Like if you have revenue, you have customers, those customers have requests, those customers have bugs that they're filing. And so you have to come to the reckoning of, cool, like we have an existing, revenue driving customer base that we have to support, but we have to make sure we invest enough time, energy, and resources in making sure we're still relevant 12 to 18 months from now. And that sense of urgency, I think, is something that a lot of companies are not fully acknowledging and diving into. I think it's one of the reasons why HG Insights ended up acquiring MadKudu. They realized, hey, like if we want to be relevant, we need AI DNA inside of this company to reshape the way we think, to reshape the way we build. And that's why they brought us in. And I think I see a lot of companies that struggle with this, and they're kind of hoping that, a few side projects here and there, like giving a PM a bit of a, exercise to research, adding a co-pilot here or a co-pilot there. They hope that's going to keep them relevant. But I mean, that ship has sailed. Like that playbook was 2023, 2024 of adding a co-pilot and seeing your valuation go up. Right now, I think the market in general is expecting a lot more. And we see this with, you look at Wix, right? They acquired Base 44. Base 44, incredible, right? They went from, I think, 0 to 50 million or some number to 50 million in revenue in a year. the market cap of Wix is not doing that well. And then you compare that to Lovable, which is equivalent to Base 44, right? And they're absolutely crushing it from like a, market valuation perspective. And I think it tells a story that the playbook of just like adding AI on top of it, on top of an existing base, is not enough to drive confidence in the market that you have a winning and surviving value prop. We're starting to see these signs, and I think it's something that CEOs and boards need to start, coming to terms with, and making sure that they understand the existential crisis that's ahead of them.
Yeah. No, at some point, generative AI use cases were pretty evident, right? In the call center, sales, UI driven, customer success. Those use cases are pretty. Now it is all about agentic AIs. What I'm sure at HG Insights also, there's a huge amount of generative AI. What do you think what are the generative AI challenges that you face at scale, basically?
Yeah, I think for us at least, there's some challenges that are inherent to our customer base. So we sell. We have a very large enterprise customer base. So when you're talking to these larger organizations, telling them, "Hey, we have another Copilot, or we have another like agentic app, SaaS app, in the cloud that you have to log into," that's kind of a no-go, right? And you're talking to, I don't know, like a Dell or Lenovo, and you're telling them, "Hey, we're gonna enable your workforce on a AI tool," they're like, cool, but they're not moving out of the places they're already working in, right? You're not going to go and change like thousands and thousands of reps' way of doing things that easily. The change management is a really big thing. So then, you have to approach, how do we deploy agentic workflows and agentic solutions in this kind of context, right? Which also has the like on-prem hybrid kind of
Yeah.
challenges from a CIO perspective of,
Right.
they don't really want data to leave the VPC.
Yes.
Those are like typical challenges in the enterprise. And I think the good news is that even though there are challenges, the AI adoption has been a lot faster than the cloud migration adoption that we've seen. Like, I'm just surprised to see all of our enterprise
Wonderful.
customers
Yeah.
already starting to run LLMs locally. They have teams building agents in LangGraph and things like that. So the beauty of it is like building a modular solution that they can plug into has been working really well. But then there are questions on our end of, using more fine-tuned LLMs, or like, when do we use fine-tuned LLMs? When do you use MCPs? When do we use CLIs? Like, there's a lot of hype around all of this. And at scale, I think it's very easy for one person to build a little bit of a workflow automation internally. When you're trying to get your, 50 enterprise reps or, 30 marketers to adopt a workflow, that starts becoming scale. And then the way you roll out these things, the way you enable the team to use those tools is a lot more of a challenge. And so figuring out how to bring down the adoption barrier, how to change the mindset from thinking of like, I'm going to solve a problem end to end in ChatGPT, into no, you have to be a system thinker. Like, what are the steps when you're creating a marketing campaign? What are the steps you go through for each of these steps? What could be automated? And start documenting that and really thinking in systems. That's a huge people and like cultural change that is, difficult to drive, because not everyone wants to change.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to change typically.
Yeah. Organization culture is, and it does take a while. Also, actually, one of the surveys which MIT had done is one of the most confused and overrated terms about what is agentic AI. So they did this survey that there's a confusion around it. In your words, Francis, what is the most simplest way we can understand what is an agentic AI, and how is it different from predictive or generative AI?
Yeah, I think it's like different layers in the system. Generative AI is more of a general denomination for the output of a machine learning process that's able to generate something that it has not seen before. Slightly different from like your typical machine learning, which is more about like recognizing patterns to replicate what it's seen. Then on the agent side, I think this is where everybody can disagree, but the way I think about it is essentially the combination of a or rather programmatic entity that is able to on its own resolve a problem that it is given and that it might not have seen before. Does it use tools or not? That's like a detail, but yeah, that's how I see it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. More agentic AIs are task oriented based. kind of a setup that solves it. Yeah. And
And I
what do
think
you?
the element of non-deterministic and the element like what is different, like what is an AI versus what is a like an automated workflow, is really this idea that the agent has to be able to solve a problem it's not seen before. I think that that's where it's slightly different, right? Because if you're just automating, like a deterministic automation is like, hey, you
Yeah.
know that you need to route something.
Yeah.
That's not agentic, that's machine learning, right? So like spam detection is not agentic, it's machine learning, right? But now if you're trying to do like a like an email processor, like an agentic executive assistant, like it is going to have to figure out how to solve for things it hasn't seen before, and it's not just a binary classification.
That is correct. Yeah. Right. 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 So, what do you see as the core challenges of agentic AI, Francis? Is it accuracy, accountability, governance, or
I mean,
something you've seen practically?
I think the explainability is a big one. I think in general, I would say it's the UX. When you think of agentic solutions, there's like more front office and back office ones. I think in the back office is a little bit easier because it's typically stuff that is like it's fairly low level, so it doesn't necessarily need to be reviewed as much. What I see is as soon as you get closer to the front office and you're starting to build agents that are, intended to help or to replace stuff that a salesperson is going to do, the observability, the traceability, the ability to understand what's actually going on and like why was the decision made the way it was made, that becomes a massive challenge. And it's not necessarily it is a challenge on the technical side that will remain that way, but I think there's a challenge in, again, change management, accepting the fact that these agentic AIs are by design non-deterministic, right? And because of that, we can put guardrails, but we will never be able to do the same level of like unit testing that we have in deterministic processes, right? You might, for the same person you want to write an email to, your agent might write, every single time a different version. And that's okay. That's like actually the definition of this non-deterministic AI. And so then you can start putting guardrails to make sure that you separate into blocks and you apply generative AI to each of the blocks. At least like the structure is deterministic. But I think that is like probably the biggest challenge is coming to terms with the fact that it is non-deterministic by definition, and that we can't control the output at as high of a fidelity as we could in deterministic systems.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's very insightful. So, when deciding whether to buy or build or integrate models, how do you evaluate trade offs? Like, can you share an example where HG Insights approach, materially changed how a team executed work or made decisions?
That's a good question. I think fundamentally one of the things that has changed, and at least even when we are evaluating software, interoperability and integration becomes a number one thing, right? I am not willing to evaluate a platform, to look at a platform that doesn't have an MCP, open APIs, or if they don't expose the data to me in some way, shape, or form, I'm just not interested because, again, I'm moving away from a world where my human agents are logging into UI to do things to building agents that will programmatically do this. So if you're not giving me a programmable, like a
Yep.
programmatic interface,
Yeah.
I'm just not interested.
Right.
So that's number one. And then in terms of build versus buy, I think there are really questions around like IP. I think what's interesting is that we are starting to see IP develop in how we do things, which is slightly different from the past, right? So in the past, doing marketing campaigns, like the execution of the marketing campaigns, there wasn't necessarily IP. There's some kind of knowledge of like how you do this in Marketo, how you query data in like Looker and then make it available in Salesforce. Cool. But now we're entering an era where our employees are starting to build agents and use those agents to do things better than the competition. The agents that are being developed materially are IP. And so making sure that you retain that IP that gives you a competitive edge today and allows you to go faster than the competition, I think means that you're better off having like some level of build internally and making sure that the IP you're developing doesn't belong to one of the tools that you're buying. So I'm seeing a lot of people will end up like they'll, for security purposes or not, they might use like the foundational models that are from the cloud. It's super easy now to run it locally, so people
Yeah.
will do that locally.
Right.
But the big thing I'm seeing is that the companies that are really like think about it a little bit ahead of the curve are really thinking about it in the sense that the agents, the workflows that they're building are core IP and therefore need to be owned internally.
Okay. So, when you say IP, what do you mean, Francis?
Intellectual property.
Oh, okay.
It's
Got
like
you.
material, like intellectual property
Yeah.
that is
Mhm.
valuable in itself. And you could
Right.
imagine,
Right.
larger organization acquiring this. And again, something that kind of happened with MadKudu, we had built a lot of agents internally to run effectively our marketing, our sales processes. And one of the things that HG was interested in when they acquired us, like, oh, we want this IP because we want to build those same agents
That makes
at
sense. Yeah.
HG. And so that becomes interesting because if we had built all of this in Zapier, then you're like, cool, then HG could just ping Zapier and say, hey, like, give us like templates for how people are
Yeah.
doing this,
Yeah.
right?
No, that's smart.
But so I think that's a significant change.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And especially with this agents, you have to give the same level of privileges as you would give a human for it to really, account level permissions or fine grained access. So, yeah, that is also a cultural shift and more security, more identity, confidence as well that comes into.
Yeah, and
So,
that's something that hasn't been figured out, by the way, on the MCP protocol, the agent to agent, like authentication and propagation of authentication is something that is, I don't think, yet ready for the full enterprise to actually be in the cloud. That's why also a lot
yeah,
of companies are doing it in house because like the way access propagates through the AI agent chain isn't figured out entirely yet.
yes, 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 absolutely. On a call with Databricks, that's what their next level of challenge is to solve the enterprise grade level security for AI agents. Yeah. So moving on to my favorite topic and where bio company specializes is in data. So many companies chase more data rather than better data. So how do you prioritize quality over quantity?
I might even have a slightly different take on that one. I think I would measure usefulness. Like at the end of the day, having a pile of data that is not useful doesn't matter, and doesn't matter if it's high quality or not. And so I think that's one of the biggest challenges of companies, especially when they're looking to buy data from vendors, is you tend to get everything kind of piecemeal rather than looking at what is the problem we're trying to solve. To solve that problem, what is the kind of data that we need? And then that data is useful. So I look at it that way. And of course, right then that means you're looking for less data, and that means that you're expecting like higher quality. So short answer is like quality over quantity, but longer answer is like focus on usefulness to measure quality.
Yes, that is true. And do you have any measures internally to elaborate and investigate and on the quality of the data?
mean, data is kind of our core business. So we have a lot of internal processes and a lot of kind of like, a lot of evaluations, some of them deterministic, some of them not deterministic, to compare with other data sets, to look at usefulness, to look at utilization. That's, one of the other, again, this goes into a little bit of IP. That's why I'm not able to share too many details there. But like how we do this is one of the core components that, creates IP for us as a business.
Okay. Observability of data is such an important thing, and sometimes it's also underrated. How do you see buyer intent data, generative AI, telemetry, and AI powered data management reshaping how companies operate and sell?
I think that one is, we're getting to the point where, every, like the firmographic data is kind of, it's a solved problem, right? You go to LinkedIn, you get the right information about that. The biggest challenge that's still unsolved is how do we know who's in market at what point in time? Historically, there have been a lot of data providers, but one of the biggest challenges was extracting insights from all of that data. It's large
Yeah.
volumes. And so, now with machine learning and to some extent generative AI, it's a lot easier to extract and to make sense from all of this at scale. So I'd say like it's a big change where this is becoming a huge advantage for companies if they know how to leverage it.
But so, what advice would you give leaders building AI systems that depend on messy, real world enterprise data?
There's no shortcut to the janitorial work of a data science. Like you start by cleaning the data. And again, you don't need to clean everything. You need to clean it in a way that makes it useful, and then you can start building on top of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I would say like the big thing is always start end to end, right? Like don't spend too much time cleaning the data before building an end to end flow. Build an end to end flow, build evals, which I think is like one of the new like terms of this year with like AI, is like having clear evals of, for this end to end flow that we're building, how do we measure quality of the output? and then like being able to run iterations so that you can, substantially measure the impact of the data cleaning that you're doing. So I've seen a lot of initiatives where we try to clean the data and then we realize actually there was like a bigger problem in the pipeline in the middle, and it didn't really help, right? So it's like you have your baseline, then you make some work to clean the data. If the output
Yeah.
is still as garbage, then you
Yeah.
have a different problem. And
Right.
and too many companies are kind of like, they become like laser focused and on just one thing rather than looking at the whole chain. So that kind of like end-to-end eval testing, I think, is critical.
Yeah. Absolutely. Could you share a story, Francis, where a predictive or agentic AI changed execution speed, customer engagement, or business outcome?
Sure. I mean, I could take what we've built internally at MadKudu, right? So we went from struggling to run marketing campaigns with a team of 3 people to being able to run everything with just half a person, because we codified everything we were doing on like the, more standard marketing of like release notes, sending emails to customers about new feature releases, webinar distribution, a lot of that stuff. It's not rocket science, but it took a lot of time to codify everything and to determine like, what are we doing? Like, how do we think about, mapping personas, problems to messaging and all that stuff. Once we did, we were able to execute with a very, very nimble team at a super high velocity. I think that's, again, it's like a small example because we were a small company, but it is something that I'm seeing happen in almost every organization.
Did you have like standards in place or a playbook? Going back to your example of eval, did you apply those for this particular use case?
We did. And so that's the funny thing. When we had a fairly large team, we didn't have the standards and the playbooks. That was the funny thing, right? Because we had people, and if people were just like refiguring out every single time we had to run something of like, hey, we're going to do this that way, that way. Like the run books were kind of codified, but not like deeply codified. Having to ask this to an agent, like there's no subject matter expertise embedded in the agent. So it's like, you have to be like pretty clear and pretty crisp about what is the run book, how to execute it. And so I think that the level of detail that we ended up putting into our documentation on how to execute something had to grow to a much, much higher level. And then from a what we measured, I mean, there was the eval of, this is more of a like, it's not a pure A/B test, but it's more looking at retroactively. Would look at when we were making these product announcements, how many iterations did our CEO ask for in terms of rewriting the PR versus like how many iterations we had to go through when we had the agent do it. The funny thing is, again, like we were able to codify a lot of the feedback that my co-founder was giving into the writer agent that was then putting together the PR. And so whenever we got new feedback from my co-founder, instead of just fixing locally the problem, we also re-embedded this into the agent and we redid a full run to see like, is the agent understanding what's going on, and then being able to see like, do we get faster to an outcome where we're ready to send that email. And then of course, like the easiest one is like the velocity, like how quickly were we able to ship things on new product releases and how many could we do with the small team that we had.
Yeah. So, what does the tech stack look like, Francis, for you?
It's a hard question. Like tech stack is evolving on a daily basis, right? So we went from, a month ago, OpenAI was the best model. Gemini 3 came out. Now all of a sudden, Gemini 3 is the best. Now Claude is back to the top, right? So I think there's some elements. So I would say like Open Router is one of our core elements of the tech stack, which allows you to switch easily from one model to another. I think Claude is still pretty much the best at writing, and it's hard to say. Like our stack is very, very, very homegrown, very low level. We do a lot of stuff that's orchestrated in either GitHub or like custom code. The good thing is like it's super easy to write custom code with Claude Code. So like we are actually building at a much lower level and working with tools that integrate with APIs. Like HubSpot is great for this. HubSpot is a good MCP. They have good APIs. So it's fairly easy to communicate with it. And yeah, so our approach is very low level with like a orchestrator code repo that then connects to all of our different systems. And so then each system has a role. Like HubSpot is like where we send the emails. Notion is where we would write the content. So the Notion was kind of the brain and the memory of the system. And then
Yep.
we're constantly communicating between those. And then we would use Gong for call recording, enablement session recording, so that we could then get the transcript from there and generate the PMM collateral. So a lot of this is like very homegrown, but using like pretty standard systems that are out there, as long as they have an API to integrate.
Yeah. No, thank you, Francis, for that. And so our viewers are like investors and technocrats or engineers. What couple of insights will you give to them? I'm I'm assuming HG Insights and as in a series, one of the series funding, right?
We are PE owned.
Oh, okay. So MadKudu was in the series. Okay. So what insights would you give to any of the technocrats or data engineers who are probably, what kind of languages or where they should be upskilling?
Yeah, I mean, I would say number one is stick to very, very, very common languages. Like, don't, whatever library has like the highest number of stars in GitHub. Stars is not necessarily the best, but the most detailed documentation, the biggest community, generally a good sign, right? So stay away from the hype of like new libraries and things like that, because the LLMs are typically not that great with those. I think if you want to have a good modern software development lifecycle, you need to use pretty vanilla technologies, right? So I'm a big believer in the TypeScript, Next, Vercel, Tailwind. And so the biggest advice I think is like start building. I think there's, people can tell you whatever they want, but when you start getting your hands dirty and like testing these different systems, you start seeing what people are talking about, right? So, build an email automation tool, build something on a weekend, but think about building it from a spec first. Like, don't just vibe code it. Try to write the specs, and then from the specs, generate the code. And then you'll start seeing what everybody is like, what the hype actually is about.
Wonderful, Francis. I mean, that's lovely. So we are just ending up with a lightning roundup section, and round is super helpful. What is one AI agent or tool you can't live without?
Claude Code.
Okay. Your favorite KPI for measuring AI transformation success?
I mean, velocity in whatever way you measure it, but velocity is number one.
Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah. I mean, it's like speed from like idea to live. So that could be like, how quickly do we go from a PM has an idea to the feature is live in the product, from a marketer has an idea of a campaign to the campaign is live and touching customers, from we have an idea for a new deck. Like, just how quickly do you execute on new ideas is the biggest component, is the biggest outcome of this AI transformation.
Very nice. And one misconception people have about AI agents or automation?
I think the biggest, I don't know if it's misconception, misuse for sure, is work slop. This is like a term that is starting to circle around. Like, there are too many people who just, take their call recordings, like take a bunch of long form content, throw it into ChatGPT and generate more long form content to share with the rest of the organization. It loses all of the strategic insight and like, that TLDR of like, okay, cool, we had a super long meeting. Even this, right? Like, we're talking a lot at the end, like people are probably going to try to remember like one thing from this conversation. So being able to find what that one thing is something that LLMs are still terrible at. They're great at doing summaries and long form summaries. They're not that great at understanding what is the key takeaway that is unique and differentiated. So I think that's the biggest misuse or misconception, is that you can build kind of strategy or like build like long form documents to share with the rest of the organization using LLMs. I think they're a great thought partner. I use ChatGPT a lot to ask me questions, but I don't ask it to give me answers. I think like thinking it can give you the answers is the biggest, I guess, then misconception.
So, what book, paper, or podcast keeps you up to speed? Now, whether it is agentic systems or everything that is happening in the AI world.
I would say two of them. I have to pitch my own AI Paper Bites. It's a 9-minute long podcast where
Nice.
we take
We'll subscribe to that.
some of the top research papers that are coming out and try to explain them and have a like tactical implication of what does it mean for people building product today. And that's one. I think the second one is 20 VC with Harry Stebbings. So he has a weekly show where he brings Jason Lemkin. So like there's 3 investors essentially that talk about what's going on in AI. It's very, very interesting to hear the perspective from the standpoint of investors. And Harry Stebbings and Jason are like typically like early stage Series A investors. And then Rory is more of a like later stage investor. So it's very, very interesting to see their different perspectives on the market and like how they're seeing things change. So I definitely recommend that one because it's like a much higher level perspective on metrics and
Yeah.
what, valuations and that kind of information.
Yeah, absolutely. when markets are everything, whether it's micro to macro economics, that all drives on how products are shaped. So, yeah, thank you. And if you could automate one enterprise process instantly, what would it be?
I'm not going to do anything fancy. I'll do the most basic, which is like logging the actual insights from a meeting into all of our tools, starting with Salesforce.
Okay, nice. Well, that ends our conversation, Francis. And thank you so much for taking us as part of, important milestone event that you had. Thank you so much for, and how can our viewers reach out to you? What's the best way?
Typically, LinkedIn is a good place. I also write on a website called Spray and Pray, written as AI, Spray and Pray.
Okay.
So they can subscribe there or hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm usually pretty active there.
Okay. Lovely, lovely. We enjoyed our conversation today, Francis. Thank you so much. This is super insightful. I mean, we learned a lot today and hope, we can incorporate a lot of these insights into our real world situations. So thank you again, Francis. And
For sure.
signing off for now.